My gaze flicked constantly across the terrain, noting each twitch, each unnatural bend of a limb, every whispered creak of machinery fused with bone. The battlefield had a pulse, a rhythm that was almost alive, and I, its unwilling midwife, moved with it. The tools of my trade were extensions of my own body. The spirit cutter hummed faintly as I sliced through fused metal and flesh. The mech hook pried open twisted armor or hoisted corpses with mechanical efficiency. Explosions, distant gunfire, and the occasional crack of collapsing ceramite punctuated the heavy silence that hung between the screams. Every sensory input assaulted me at once, the tang of blood in my nose, the taste of ash in my mouth, the heat of nearby fires radiating against my skin. I cataloged it all, noting what was valuable, what was useless, what might hide danger, and what could kill me if I lingered too long. Memories of my first day on this field clawed at the edges of consciousness. The panic, the vomiting, the instinct to flee, it had all been replaced with grim efficiency. Yet even now there were moments when I felt the weight of the dead pressing down, the eyes of corpses accusing me of a betrayal I could not name. Shadows seemed to twitch in the corners of vision, whispers of old soldiers and forgotten horrors threading through the air. The truth was undeniable. The dead never stayed still, and neither did we. The living crept among them, driven by duty, fear, and the faintest glimmer of hope that we might emerge unscathed. Step by step, corpse by corpse, I moved forward, a silent witness to a world that had no use for the living, and even less for those brave or foolish enough to care. Imperial salvagers were the lowest of the low, the disposable caste condemned to crawl through fire, blood, and ruin, while officers and servitors watched from the safety of elevated platforms or armored trenches. The name of salvager sounded noble enough on paper, but it was a lie. It marked you as expendable, a cog in a vast machine where your life had no more value than the scrap you retrieved. Every movement, every twitch, every hesitation could earn a punishment worse than death. Servitors with augmetic limbs designed to maim or experiment on the disobedient. Our overseers were monstrous fusions of flesh and machine, and their presence was suffocating. Hydraulic limbs creaked, red optic lenses swept over us constantly, and a low hum of mechanized servos filled the air like a predator's growl. One wrong step, 1 second of hesitation to glance at a twitching corpse, one thought of mercy could draw the full force of their punishment. I had watched others disappear quietly, ripped from the line without warning, and knew that survival meant more than caution. It meant complete submission, outwardly at least. My team was small, a ragged collection of faces hollowed by smoke and fear, eyes glazed from horrors no human should endure. Silence dominated us more often than conversation. When voices were heard, they were whispers, brief mutterings that dissolved quickly into the roar of distant artillery or the crackle of burning armor. We worked in close proximity yet alone, each of us locked in private battles against nausea, fatigue, and the slow gnawing despair that came from watching bodies decompose beneath your hands while extracting what the overseers deemed valuable. Emotions were dangerous. Hope was forbidden. Any expression of fear, guilt, or longing could mark you as weak. We had learned to compartmentalize. Some of us muttered prayers to dead gods, others whispered to themselves about distant families or lives they would never see again. I focused on the work, disassembling fused armor, extracting augmetics, cataloging salvaged rounds. But even I felt the weight of it pressing against my mind. The battlefield was alive in ways outsiders could never understand. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Corpses twitched with the last remnants of life, or perhaps the warp. Small, feral creatures scavenged the dead, feeding and multiplying in a world no longer bound by order. Our overseers noticed none of this, or if they did not care. The Imperium demanded productivity over comprehension, extraction over curiosity. We were taught a lesson that would echo through our bones and minds for the rest of our lives. In the Imperium, life is cheap, death is currency, and mercy is a crime. Even as I worked, my fingers slick with blood and soot, I understood that survival required more than skill. It required abandoning the remnants of humanity that tugged at my conscience. And in this place, at the very bottom of the caste, I was learning what it truly meant to be expendable. The smell hit me before I even saw the bodies. Sharp, metallic, acrid, and impossible to ignore. Plasma fire had swept through this sector, leaving bones, calcine and armor fused to flesh in grotesque patterns. The ground was littered with twisted weapons, mangled ceramite, and the occasional twitching limb that refused to obey death. One wrong step could trigger a buried mine, detonate an unexploded round, or summon the attention of mutated scavengers that lurked in the shadows. Every move demanded vigilance, every breath a calculation between survival and collapse. I carried my mech hook and spirit cutter like extensions of my own body. The spirit cutter's hum cut through the thick, smoke-laden air, vibrating against my hands with mechanical insistence. It had been years since my first day here, yet the memory remained vivid. I had vomited at the smell recoiled from twitching limbs, and panicked when a buried grenade tore through mud and metal, hurling the corpse of a guardsman into the air. Now I worked with a mechanical precision that was more reflex than thought. The trauma had become routine, normalized in a world where horror was as constant as the mud underfoot. The battlefield pulsed with life, or at least a semblance of. Bodies moved in subtle, unnatural ways. Fingers twitched, eyes flickered with traces of the warped limbs, curled or uncurled as though resisting the inevitability of death. Small feral creatures scuttled among the corpses, their jaws gnashing, eyes glinting with predatory intelligence. Sometimes in the thick fog of smoke I could swear I saw shadows that weren't casts, forms that moved without bodies, whispering the promises of knowledge or destruction that the battlefield seemed to withhold from the living. The sensory assault was relentless. The tang of blood mixed with oxidized metal clung to my nostrils. Heat radiated from scorched earth and smoldering bodies, pricking the skin beneath my scorched and patched armor. Every movement produced a symphony of grotesque sounds, cracking bones, the hiss of melting ceramite, the faint whirring of damaged servos and broken machinery, and the occasional scream of the trapped or dying. My ears ached from the constant din, my eyes burned from smoke and sweat. Yet I pressed on. The tools of my trade became extensions of survival. The mech hook pried open fused armor. The spirit cutter excised augmatics and machinery embedded in bodies. I cataloged everything with precision, a mixture of fear, training, and desperate necessity guiding my hand. Every object removed carried a whisper of the dead's history, a life interrupted, a sacrifice ignored, and sometimes the whispers were literal, seeping into my skull from the lingering warp taint that the battlefield carried like a shadow. I understood with grim clarity that the dead never stayed still, and I, moving among them, was never truly alone. Each step, each cut, each salvaged piece reinforced a bitter truth. Survival required detachment, obedience, and a mind willing to endure horrors that would break anyone unprepared. And yet beneath the numbness I still felt the old stirrings of guilt, fear, and the flickering memory of humanity. Faint, fragile, and dangerous, I had been crawling through a pile of mangled armor and scorched corpses when I heard it, a rasping, wet sound that made my chest tighten. At first I thought it was the usual whispers of smoke and the warp playing tricks on my mind. But it wasn't. It was a voice, human. Or, at least, it had once been. The soldier lay half-buried beneath fused armor, ceramite warped and twisted around his body. One eye remained, cracked and glimmering with pain and recognition. His flesh was burned, blistered and partially fused to the ground, yet somehow he was still alive. "Please, end it," he croaked, voice hoarse and ragged. His hand stretched toward me, trembling, barely able to lift itself from the mud. Every instinct screamed at me to do something, to help. But I knew better. Aid was forbidden. The overseer's servitor lenses were never far, and they punished hesitation without mercy. I had seen salvagers torn apart for lust, limbs removed, augmatics destroyed, the unlucky left as warnings. My stomach churned, bile rising, but I forced my hands to remain steady around my mech hook. Survival demanded it. And yet I could not completely ignore him. His eyes held something I had almost forgotten: trust, desperation, and intention. With a trembling hand, he clutched a small device, a data tag, and pressed it into my palm. It was warm, heavier than it should have been, as though it carried the weight of his final act. "You must survive," he whispered, eyes flickering with pain and relief, and then with a final shudder he went still. The overseers were near, their optic lenses glinting red as they scanned the field. "Okay." I moved mechanically, hiding my hesitation, while the other salvagers worked around us with the practiced numbness of experience. Inside, a storm raged: guilt, fear, confusion, and a sense of awe I could not name. I had been entrusted with something forbidden, something that could alter the course of my life, or end it. The battlefield did not pause for grief or reflection. Smoke rose from distant fires, mingling with the acrid tang of blood and melted ceramite. The corpses twitched with the last shreds of life. Small mutated insects crawled over broken bodies, and the hum of spirit cutters cut through the thick, oppressive air. And I carried the data tag, the silent promise of something more, pressed like a heartbeat into my palm. I realized in that moment that survival alone was no longer enough. The dead could speak, and some of them could act, even in death. Their choices, final and deliberate, could bind the living to a path of danger, discovery, and heresy. The soldier's act had set me on such a path, and there was no turning back. Even as I continued my grim work, his eyes, his voice, and that data tag lingered in my mind, a constant reminder that in this war-torn world, even the dead could change the fate of the living. It started with a flicker in the mud, subtle at first, symbols etched into the scorched armor of a corpse curling like black flames. My stomach twisted. At first I thought it was a battle insignia, warped by fire, or a trick of smoke and shadow. But the signs were wrong. Twisted, unnatural, and obscene, they spoke of something forbidden. Cultist marks. Chaos corruption. My hands itched to recoil, to bury my eyes in the safety of numbed routine. But the overseers were nearby, their mechanical eyes sweeping across the field, unblinking and omnipresent. Productivity could not wait for fear. The corpses themselves seemed to resist our intrusion. Limbs twitched violently, as if some unseen will still lingered within them. Warp-tainted insects crawled over faces and through torn armor, leaving patterns of movement that were impossible to ignore. Some of the bodies emitted faint, irregular pulses as though life had not entirely left them. I worked faster, sweat stinging my eyes, pounding, not from fear of death, but from the realization that the battlefield was alive in ways I had never known. The overseers forced efficiency with a brutal, mechanical logic. Every hand moved in rhythm with the drills, the spirit cutters humming in unison. One mistake, a pause, a glance at the twitching limbs, could draw punishment that made death seem merciful. I noticed my fellow salvagers stealing glances at the marked bodies, their faces pale, eyes darting, hands trembling. Some whispered prayers to gods who had long abandoned us. Others muttered curses under their breath. I felt a shiver crawl across my spine, not from cold, but from the silent knowledge that these marks, these whispers, were a warning and a temptation. We salvaged everything, even the corrupted, even the things that should not have been touched. Metal fused to flesh, augmetics still warm with unholy energy, and small, warp-tinged creatures hiding in folds of torn armor. Every object we collected carried a weight, a presence, as though the dead could reach through our hands and speak to us. I cataloged each piece with grim efficiency, but inside the whispers grew louder. I felt my mind stretching, tugged toward something dangerous. I glanced at my team again. They were hollowed shells, eyes glazed, faces tight with suppressed panic. The marked bodies continued to twitch, their movements subtle but unmistakable. Shadows slithered unnaturally at the edges of vision. Insects crawled in patterns that made no logical sense. And I knew the dead were not idle. They were watching, waiting, aware. The battlefield had a consciousness subtle and terrifying, and we were its tools. I clenched my jaw and pressed on. Survival demanded it. Obedience demanded it. The whispers of guilt and dread threatened to break me, but I could not allow them to take hold. Not here, not now. The marked bodies had chosen their own role, and I understood with grim certainty that we, living or dead, were merely part of the machinery of the Imperium. And yet the unease gnawed at me, a warning that the dead were never truly still, and some secrets were meant to be unearthed only at the cost of sanity. The machine lay half buried beneath layers of mud, ash, and twisted metal. Its form was alien and obscene, yet there was a grim familiarity to it. Cogs fused with bone, wires coiled like serpents around scorched armor, and panels that seemed to breathe, pulsating with a dim, sickly light. Even from a distance I could feel it, a presence that was almost alive, whispering to the corners of my mind, tugging at thoughts I had fought to suppress. The overseers barked orders as if the machine were no more than a pile of scrap, extracted piece by piece, efficiency above all. No hesitation. Their voices were mechanical, void of emotion, and their servitor lenses scanned us like predators marking prey. I approached cautiously, my hands tightening around the spirit cutter, aware of every twitch of the alien contraption. Each panel I pried open hummed with forbidden energy, a resonance that set my teeth on edge and made the hairs on my neck rise. As I began the extraction, the whispers became words, subtle, insidious, half-formed thoughts that burrowed into my mind. See what lies inside. Take it. You were chosen. I forced myself to ignore them, focusing on removing the twisted augmetics and mechanical components, cataloging each one with grim efficiency. But even as I worked, I could feel the machine observing, analyzing, as if it knew I was more than a simple salvager. Each pulse of its unholy energy resonated with my heartbeat, sinking in ways I could not understand, but instinctively obeyed. Around me, the other salvagers moved like shadows, their faces pale, eyes fixed on their work with the practiced numbness of long experience. Some paused, glancing nervously at the machine, only to lower their gaze quickly when a servitor swept by. We had all heard the whispers, seen the strange pulses in its hull, and felt the subtle tug on our minds. Yet no one stopped. Survival demanded obedience. We were cogs in the machinery of the Imperium, expendable, disposable, and dangerously close to corruption. Step by step, I removed panels, gears fused with flesh, data cores glowing faintly with unholy light. Each component carried a pull, a voice that promised power, knowledge, and purpose beyond anything sanctioned by the Imperium. The overseers did not notice, or perhaps they did and simply didn't care. Productivity mattered more than heresy, more than sanity, more than the minds being subtly warped by contact with forbidden technology. My fingers ached as I pried a twisted gear assembly free, and for a fleeting moment the machine seemed to sigh, a vibration that ran up my arm and lodged in my chest. I froze, pulse hammering, aware that I had felt something few salvagers ever did: recognition. The whispers intensified, more insistent now. You are chosen. You are ready. I clenched my teeth and forced my focus back on the work. Each component removed brought a subtle change, a shift in perception, a tickle of awareness I could not explain. I felt the battlefield differently now, as if the machine had opened my senses, connected me to something beyond comprehension. It was terrifying and exhilarating. By the time the last piece was lifted, the machine's presence lingered in my mind, its pulse echoing in my skull like a heartbeat that was not entirely mine. I understood with a shiver that some machines do not die. Some choose their salvagers, and I had been chosen. Night fell like a suffocating shroud, swallowing the battlefield in shadows so thick that even the dim glow of smoldering fires seemed feeble. The temperature dropped, but the air was still heavy with the acrid stench of blood, charred flesh, and molten ceramite. Every inhalation carried a mixture of smoke, metal, and decay that burned my lungs and coated my tongue. The ground squelched underfoot, a treacherous mix of mud, sludge, and gore, each step a reminder that the living were never safe here, and the dead were never truly still. We moved in silence, shadows among shadows, carrying the tools of our trade. The spirit cutters hummed softly, their vibration almost soothing against the tension in my muscles, while the mech hook scraped across twisted metal and armor, fused to bone. The night made the dead come alive in strange ways. Limbs twitched unnaturally, corpses shifted with subtle but deliberate motions, and the occasional eye, when it had survived, gleamed in the dark with unholy intelligence. Every twitch sent a chill down my spine, reminding me that even after death, the battlefield had its own will. Feral creatures emerged under the cover of darkness, scavengers and mutants drawn to the scent of blood and decay. Their eyes glinted like shards of metal, jaws snapping as they picked at corpses or attacked anything that moved too quickly. We avoided them when possible, but there was no safety, no real safety at all. One of my team, a young recruit, vanished without a sound. No scream, no struggle, just gone. The overseers didn't comment, didn't acknowledge it. We knew better than to speak of it. Survival demanded silence. The whispers returned, soft at first, threading through the mind like smoke curling around a flame. Microvisions flickered at the edge of my perception, geometries that defied comprehension, machinery writhing as though alive, and faces in the mud that were not human. The warp pressed against reality, subtle but insistent, tugging at nerves and thoughts alike. My pulse quickened as the whispers grew into words, fragmented, insidious. You belong here. You were chosen. Take it. It is yours. Yet despite it all, we worked. Corpse by corpse, body by body, extracting augmetics, salvaging metal, cataloging ammunition. My hands moved with mechanical precision, but my mind struggled to remain anchored. Shadows seemed to twist unnaturally around the edges of my vision, and the dead occasionally rose enough to crawl, eyes wide and empty, their mouths gaping in silent accusation. I forced myself to look away, to continue, aware that hesitation would draw punishment from the overseers. Or worse, the whispers from the warp would find purchase in my mind. By the end of the shift, the night had left its mark, exhaustion mixed with fear, and yet in the midst of it, a strange exhilaration pulsed through me. The darkness was alive, yes, and dangerous. But it had also revealed something essential. The battlefield demanded more than obedience. It demanded adaptation, attentiveness, and perhaps even a willingness to listen to voices that no one else dared acknowledge. And as I retreated from the worst of the night, I realized that the dead were never alone, and neither were we. The shadows, the whispers, the pulse of the warp, all had chosen to make their presence known. Night on this battlefield was not merely absence of light. It was a test, a crucible, and a reminder that survival came at the cost of sanity. The data tag burned in my palm like a shard of ice and fire combined. I had carried it for days, avoiding it, afraid of what secrets it might contain. Now in a small hidden alcove beneath the ruins of a shattered wall, I dared to examine it. The device was deceptively simple, a small metallic rectangle etched with finely carved symbols and lines that seemed to shimmer faintly under the smoke-filtered light. I activated the decoding sequence carefully, my hands shaking despite the numbness I had cultivated over countless days among the dead. The display flickered to life, revealing coordinates, fragmented orders, and cryptic warnings. This was not just a location, it was an instruction. Somewhere beneath the battlefield, hidden beneath layers of mud, debris, and corruption, lay something forbidden. The soldier who had pressed it into my hand had chosen me deliberately. He had saved me, and in doing so entrusted me with a path no Imperial salvager should ever walk. The whispers returned, low at first, threading through my mind like smoke curling around the embers of a dying fire. Follow, discover, take it. You are chosen. The artifact's voice, or perhaps the echoes of the heretic machine from earlier, pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The promise was irresistible, intoxicating. Knowledge, power, survival beyond the limitations of ordinary salvagers. Yet danger lurked in every syllable, every flicker of light on the tag's surface. One wrong move, one misstep, and I could become nothing more than another corpse buried beneath mud and fire, unrecorded and unremembered. I glanced around the battlefield. Smoke coiled in ghostly tendrils above the shattered ruins, and distant artillery fire rattled the earth. My fellow salvagers were far away, working as if the world were normal, their movements mechanical and detached. They would never understand, never know what the data tag contained, and if the overseers discovered my intentions, it would mean certain death. My survival, which had always demanded obedience, was now complicated by a choice that could doom me, or grant me unimaginable power. Conflict churned within me. Follow the coordinates and risk annihilation, or remain obedient, safe in the limited bounds of sanctioned salvage work. The tag pulsed faintly in my hand, as though alive, urging me to act. I felt the soldier's final sacrifice pressing against my consciousness. He had chosen me for this purpose. His death had not been meaningless. It had been deliberate, a seed planted in the scorched soil of the battlefield. I breathed heavily, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity pressing down. The dead around me were silent witnesses, and the battlefield seemed to sense my hesitation. Small movements in the mud, the twitch of a corpse, the glimmer of something in the shadow, all reminded me that nothing here was truly inert. The choice was mine, but the consequences would ripple far beyond my own survival. Finally, I slid the tag into a hidden pocket, my mind set. The path beneath the battlefield awaited, and I knew, with a clarity that both thrilled and terrified me, that once I followed it, there would be no turning back. The soldier had saved me, yes, but in doing so, he had bound me to a destiny that might well destroy me, and yet the pull of the unknown, the whispers of power and purpose, made hesitation impossible. Survival alone was no longer enough. The entrance was hidden beneath layers of mud, corpses, and twisted metal, a forgotten seam in the battlefield that the overseers had overlooked. I crouched low, heart hammering, feeling the pulse of the artifact against my chest. It seemed to thrum in anticipation, guiding me toward the unknown. The air was thick with the smell of decay, the sharp tang of blood, and the faint metallic whisper of machinery long dead. I hesitated only a moment before forcing myself forward, descending into darkness that swallowed sound and light alike. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, and lined with roots that had long since fused with wreckage. Each step squelched in waterlogged mud, sending up tiny waves of filth that lapped at my knee. The walls seemed alive, pulsating faintly as though the warp itself had seeped into the stones, a subtle vibration crawling along my skin and nerves. Shadows clung to the corners of my vision, morphing into shapes that might have been machinery or faces. I kept my hands tight around the mech hook, spirit cutter, and artifact, each an anchor against the encroaching unease. As I moved deeper, the tunnels widened into a vast chamber, ancient and oppressive. Ruins sprawled before me, remnants of a civilization older than any recorded Imperial history. Twisted machinery hummed faintly in the darkness, and faint, crying noises echoed through the corridors, like machine spirits mourning some forgotten tragedy. Parts of the walls were fused with alien alloys, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with unholy light. Every instinct told me to flee, but the artifact urged me onward, a silent voice threading through my mind. You are meant to take this. You are chosen. The air was thick with a presence I could not name, something ancient, aware, and patient. Alien technology fused with Imperial design, a grotesque marriage of machine and flesh. The room was littered with components that defied logic, panels that seemed to breathe, wires that writhed like serpents, and gears that turned without any visible source of power. Each item vibrated with a latent energy that prickled the hair on my arms, tugging at my thoughts and whispering in a language I almost understood. And then I saw it, the artifact's counterpart, hidden, forbidden, a small device glowing faintly as if acknowledging me. Its hum synchronized with the pulse of the one I carried, a heartbeat threading through the chamber, linking me to the machinery, the dead, and the whispers that lingered at the edges of perception. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I could feel eyes watching, from the shadows, from the walls, from the machine itself. Awareness pressed down on me, heavy and insistent. I took the artifact, hiding it close. In that moment, the chamber seemed to exhale a subtle shift that rippled through the air and the ground. The whispers became voices, faint but unmistakable. You have been chosen. You will wield the power. Fear, awe, and a perverse exhilaration surged through me. I was alive, yes, but changed. The battlefield above was still screaming, still churning with death. But down here, I had discovered something older, something that could alter everything. I left the ruins with care, retracing my steps through the tunnels, each shadow, each whisper, each pulse of energy pressing into my consciousness. The artifact's weight in my pocket was heavier than it should have been, a constant reminder that my survival was no longer merely physical. I had acquired knowledge and power that the Imperium forbade. I was marked, and the battlefield had already begun to awaken me to the consequences. By the time I crawled out from beneath the mound of corpses and shattered ceramite, the sky above the battlefield had shifted from dull gray to a sickly orange. Ash drifted through the air like dead snow. Every step back toward the salvage lines felt heavier, my boots sinking deeper into mud thick with blood and oil. The artifact pulsed faintly against my ribs, an unnerving reminder of what I had taken, of what I now carried inside me. I forced myself to walk steadily, to breathe evenly, to appear as nothing more than another exhausted, broken salvager trudging through the dead. But the ground beneath me felt different now, as if the soil itself recognized me, whispering secrets through each step. Before I even reached the perimeter, I noticed the overseers had changed formation. Their servitors, usually stationary with dim, mindless optics, now scanned the air with sharp bursts of red light, sweeping the area as though hunting for something, or someone. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard and kept moving. A pair of servo skulls drifted toward me, their metal jaws clacking softly as they hovered just meters above the ground. They circled me like vultures, their auspex lenses glowing with faint blue rune. One of them let out a shrill mechanical beep, and for a moment I thought they had detected the artifact's energy signature. Hide it. Hide everything. The whisper wasn't mine. It crawled through my skull like a cold wire. I stiffened, fighting to keep my expression frozen in the blank, resigned look expected of my cast. I adjusted the strap on my salvage bag, making sure the artifact was buried beneath coils of scrap metal and broken augmetics. The nearest servitor turned its eyeless face toward me, its jaw extended unnaturally, scraping against its own metal throat as it issued a grinding command. Halt! A cleansing protocol initiated. My blood turned to ice. But instead of targeting me, the servitor rotated toward another salvager. Oh, Joval, a quiet man who worked several lanes down from me. His hands were shaking as he tried to explain something, his voice cracking under the servitor's stare. I realized then someone else had gone missing during the shift. Someone had been unaccounted for. Someone they thought might have been wandering where workers were forbidden to go. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. I forced myself not to react as the servitor dragged Joval away, his screams quickly muffled by the armored bulk of the Overseer's sanctified gauntlet. We all knew the truth. If the Imperium suspected heresy, they didn't seek answers. They created warnings. But my hands began trembling anyway. The artifact's presence hummed against my ribs, syncing with my pulse, whispering reassurance. Or temptation. They cannot stop what you carry. You are chosen. Keep it. Protect it. I shook my head sharply, as if denying a hallucination. Yet the smoke around me seemed to respond, curling into shapes that rippled with strange, impossible movement. When I reached my assigned salvage lane, Overseer Unit 17 approached. Its heavy, mechanical body cast a long shadow. Incense burner swung from its chest, the scent of burning oils mixing with the stench of death. Its voice was a grotesque harmony of human and machine. Report deviation. Biological unit shows elevated neural activity. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. My breath caught, my skin prickled. I felt the artifact pulse hard as though reacting to danger. I lowered my head in a submissive bow. No deviation, Overseer. Working continuously. The Overseer leaned closer, its metallic jaw inches from my face. Mechanical tendrils drifted past my shoulders, sniffing for contamination, scanning for unauthorized tech. One tendril hovered over my chest, directly above the hidden artifact. My vision blurred. My heartbeat thundered. Hide, bury, silence. The artifact's pulse spread through my body like a second heartbeat, and I felt something. A pressure, a distortion. The tendril flickered with static as it passed over me, and then jerked away as if repelled. The Overseer's optics dimmed, recalibrated, then redirected elsewhere. The new salvage. Productivity quota increased. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me like cold water. They hadn't detected it, whatever Ite was becoming. But I knew then that the Overseers sensed something. They were growing suspicious, and their suspicion was a death sentence. Yet even as fear hollowed my stomach, the artifact's whisper lingered. Calm, confident, certain. They cannot stop you now. The path is set. You have already begun. And deep down in a place I refused to acknowledge, I felt it too. It began with a tremor. So small at first that I thought it was just my nerves reacting to the Overseer's earlier inspection. But the ground shuddered again, harder this time, sending ripples through the mud and dislodging bits of shattered ceramite. A low rumble rolled across the field like a growl from something buried deep beneath the earth. The salvagers around me paused, tools dangling from their hands. We were trained not to flinch, not to question, but instinct overcame obedience. Heads lifted, eyes wide. Even the servitors hesitated, their auspex lenses flickering with static. In the distance, beyond the haze of smoke and the jagged silhouettes of broken tanks, a deeper roar erupted, far too powerful to be seismic. Then another. Then a thunderous series of impacts, each one closer than the last. Artillery. A new assault had begun. The sky lit up with streaks of fire as bombardment shells tore through the cloud cover and screamed toward the ground. The first strike hit a few hundred meters away, erupting in a column of fire and shrapnel that blotted out everything in view. The shockwave punched the air from my lungs, hurling bodies, dead and alive, into the mud. Chaos followed instantly. Servitor drones scrambled in erratic patterns, their programming overwhelmed. Overseers barked mechanized orders through vox speakers, their voices drowned in explosions. Salvagers, forbidden from retreating but too terrified to remain still, scattered like insects, seeking shelter where none existed. The rumbling grew louder. The ground split in places, revealing blackened soil and rivers of foul-smelling slag. Corpses rolled as the earth buckled beneath them, limbs twitching grotesquely from the concussive force. Broken helmets cracked open, skulls shifting inside like marionettes jerked by unseen strings. I stumbled forward, barely able to see through the thick, roiling smoke. Shrapnel whistled past my head, embedding itself in a corpse beside me. I dropped low, crawling over bodies and debris as the air thrummed with incoming fire. Another massive impact struck close, too close, too close. The ground heaved, and the corpse beneath my knee spasmed. Reflexively, I jerked back. It wasn't spasming, it was moving. For a moment I thought the warp had finally devoured my sanity. But more bodies twitched around me, shuddering, lurching, some dragged by the shockwaves, others animated with unnatural stiffness. A pile of guardsmen shifted as if trying to stand. An Estert's corpse, split from collarbone to hip, lifted an arm in a grotesque imitation of life. The battlefield had awakened. The artifact burned against my ribs, vibrating with such intensity that I felt the rhythm spreading through my chest. My breath caught as a surge of energy rippled from it, outward into the air, resonating with the chaos around me. Bombardment shells continued to fall. Flames consumed trenches. Gas clouds drifted like pale ghosts. A burning tank lurched forward on failing treads before collapsing in a molten heap. And the dead kept rising. Some lifted only their heads, jaws opening in silent scream. Others clawed at the mud with broken fingers or dragged themselves in slow, shuddering motions. Many collapsed again after a few moments, but not all. One corpse, a soldier missing half his torso, turned its eyeless face toward me. Its jaw clicked open and shut, emitting a dry, choking rattle. My breath froze. I staggered backward as the thing lurched, pulling itself forward with its remaining arm. Panic surged hot and wild in my chest. I reached instinctively for the artifact. My fingers barely brushed its surface before a pulse of force erupted from it, a shimmering burst that rippled outward in a perfect sphere. The shockwave struck the animated corpse, flinging it onto its back. The crawling bodies around me slammed into the dirt. Smoke peeled away in a swirling ring. The world went silent for a heartbeat. My ears rang. My chest throbbed. The artifact glowed through my clothing, a warm humming beacon that felt almost alive. Above the ringing in my skull came the faint sound of metal shifting. I looked up. An overseer stood at the edge of the blast radius, optics wide, lenses flickering erratically. It had seen everything. Its Vox grill crackled to life with a distortion-laden shriek. A corrupted unit detected. Tech heresy confirmed. The words tore the air apart. I froze, heart dropping into my stomach. Not dare him. Around the overseer, servitor drones pivoted toward me. Auspex sensors scanned. Weaponized mech tendrils extended, rattling with murderous intent. The bombardment thundered on, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat and the artifact's whisper. Calm, confident, inevitable. Run. And for the first time since the soldier pressed the data tag into my palm, I obeyed. Not because I chose to, but because instinct seized my legs and hurled me forward through smoke, mud, and shrapnel. Behind me, overseers bellowed mechanized commands, their servitors scrambling across the corpse, strewn ground. Vox speakers crackled with shrill alarms. Heretical unit, detain or purge. A biological subject displaying unsanctioned energies. Execution warrant authorized. Every word speared my spine. I pushed harder, slipping between heaps of bodies, stumbling through pools of melted armor and coagulating blood. Artillery blasts shook the ground in a relentless rhythm, each one threatening to crack my bones from sheer vibration. The artifact pressed against my chest like a living thing, its heat rising to a near-burning intensity. You cannot hide now. You cannot submit. Only forward, forward. The whispers threaded through my skull, no longer subtle or distant. They were loud, confident, as if awakening in triumph. Behind me, servo skulls screeched as they descended, targeting runes flashing crimson. A beam of searing light tore past my head, vaporizing the corpse of a fallen guardsman in a blinding flash. Another shot grazed my arm, the heat slicing across flesh before I could cry out. I dove behind a twisted, half-melted chimera tank, chest heaving, lungs burning. My blood dripped into the muddy water beneath me, disappearing like it had never existed. Shadows shifted, metal groaned. Static crackled through the air as Overseer Unit 17 stalked into view on its piston-driven legs. Its Vox grill roared, a surrender the unsanctioned device. Pain will not be minimized. Its servo claws extended, long needle-like instruments dripping with sanctified oil. One was meant to pierce. Another to extract, both meant to leave me a barely living warning to the others. I backed away, trembling, desperate, and the artifact throbbed again harder than ever, sending a shock through my ribs. My vision blurred. The ground vibrated not from artillery, but from inside me as energy built like pressure in a sealed chamber. The overseer lunged. I raised my arm in sheer panic, and the world detonated. Not outward, like the earlier shockwave. Controlled, focused. A spear of shimmering force erupted from my palm, crackling through the air like lightning forged from metal and memory. It struck the overseer square in the chest. Its armor buckled inward. Sparks cascaded in a shower of blue light. Its servo limbs jerked convulsively before the entire machine collapsed in a heap of twitching metal. Silence, then destruction. The overseer exploded in a burst of crackling energy, sending its skull mask flying into the mud embankment beside me. The metal was scorched black, melted from the inside out. I stared at my hand. It trembled uncontrollably, still buzzing with an aftershock of power I couldn't begin to understand. My fingertips glowed faintly for a moment as if infused with embers. What did I just? A shadow passed over me. One of the senior overseers, the ones who rarely left the command platforms, stood at the crest of a broken hill, servo staves humming with electrical charge. Its cloaked form was half machine, half mummified flesh, its skull-like face framed by incense braziers emitting clouds of oily smoke. Its voice split the sky. A corrupted salvager detected. Unnatural energy signature confirmed. Purge protocol activated. Dozens of servitors reoriented toward me, their weapons warmed with the rising wine of lethal charge. I staggered backward, feeling the artifact's heartbeat racing with mine. You are awakened now. You cannot return. You cannot kneel. Run. My legs obeyed before thought could catch up. I sprinted through the wreckage, past shuddering corpses and burning vehicles, every blast of artillery seeming to chase me like a pursuing giant. Behind me, the overseer's commands echoed. Contain the heretic. Disable limbs. Preserve core. Bring back the device intact. Their words solidified one truth. I was no longer a worker, not even a fugitive. I was a threat, one they intended to eliminate or dissect. The artifact's power sparked again beneath my ribs, filling me with a terrifying clarity. Survival was no longer an act of obedience. It was rebellion. And the battlefield had only begun to reshape me. Eric didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He just stared at the glowing mark on his wrist, the tiny ember of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. For a moment, it felt like the entire world folded into silence. And then, a whirl of wind burst around him. The trees bent inward. The dust lifted from the ground. The shadows stretched toward him as though bowing or submitting. Ren stumbled back, eyes widening. Eric, do you feel that? I don't know, Eric whispered, but he did feel it. It was crawling under his skin, filling him with a warmth that didn't belong to this world. Alira stepped forward cautiously, her voice trembling. This can't be possible. The last time someone awakened a forbidden spark. She trailed off. Luma finished the sentence for her. The entire kingdom fell. Eric froze. What are you saying? That this, he held up his wrist as it glowed brighter, is dangerous? Ren swallowed hard. A bro dangerous? This is beyond dangerous. This is the type of power they write ancient warnings about. The ground vibrated again, not with the weight of something approaching, but with the resonance of Eric's awakening. The spark flared, and then a voice, not from the forest, not from the sky, not from any direction at all, but inside Eric's mind. I've finally awakened, my chosen. Eric jerked backward, clutching his head. What was that? Alira's face turned pale. Eric, tell me you didn't hear a voice. I did. And it wasn't just a voice. It spoke to me like it knew me. Luma exhaled shakily. That confirms it. The spark inside you isn't just magic. It's alive. Eric's heart thundered. Alive? He tried to focus on the presence in his mind, but it slipped like smoke. It left behind only a faint whisper. Not yet. And then silence. Eric looked at his friends, all staring at him with fear, curiosity, and something else. Something heavier. Expectation, responsibility, destiny. Alira walked toward him slowly. Eric, the forbidden spark hasn't appeared in centuries. It chooses its bearer, and if it chose you, she took a breath. Then something catastrophic is coming. Eric looked down at the glowing mark again. Now pulsing like wildfire. What does it want from me? He whispered. Alira's eyes sharpened. Not what it wants from you, but what it wants through you. Luma nodded grimly. We need answers, and there's only one place that might have them. Ren raised a brow. Oh no, I do not like that tone. Alira continued. The ruins of the Allendor Sanctum, the birthplace of the forbidden sparks, the only surviving record of their purpose. Eric felt a chill crawl down his spine. That place is forbidden. Alira locked eyes with him. So is your power. Silence, wind, the spark pulsing, and then Eric nodded. Then we're going. Luma sighed. I knew you'd say that. And as usual, I hate that I'm coming with you. Rin clapped Eric's shoulder. Adventure Squad, back at it. Illyra stepped closer and spoke softly, only loud enough for Eric to hear. Eric, whatever's inside you is waking up. You need to be ready. Eric didn't know how to be ready. He only knew one thing. The spark had chosen him. Whether he liked it or not, the path forward was already set. The journey began at dawn, the kind of dawn that didn't feel welcoming, but heavy, as if the sky itself knew what Eric was carrying inside him. A pale gold horizon stretched ahead, brushing the treetops with a dim glow. The forest was unusually silent. No birds, no rustling, no distant growls, just stillness, almost like the world was holding its breath. Rin kicked a pebble as they walked. I swear this place was louder yesterday. Where did all the animals go? Her ears twitched once, then twice. Oh, they're still here, she murmured. They're just hiding. Rin paled. From what? Luma tapped her staff against Eric's wrist, right where the forbidden spark pulsed beneath the skin. From that, Eric flinched. The spark responded instantly, glowing faintly beneath the fabric of his sleeve. It was subtle, but enough to make the air hum. Illyra walked beside him with calculated calmness. Her boots crunched softly against the leaves as she spoke. The Elendor Sanctum is 3 days from here. If we take the safe route, Ren groaned. The safe route sounds great. Amazing. Let's do that. Illyra shook her head. We don't have time. Ren nearly stumbled. We always have time for the safe route. Eric looked at her. Illyra, what aren't you telling us? She hesitated, a rare thing. Illyra was all logic and confidence. Hesitation meant one thing. The truth was worse than the danger. Finally, she spoke. If the spark awakened, then other forces felt it too. The forest seemed to grow colder. What forces? Eric asked. Illyra stopped walking. Oh, the wardens. Luma's ears flattened. Oh no. Rin threw his hands up. Who the hell are the wardens? Oh. Illyra answered with a tone that felt like a dark cloud descending. They were the guardians of the forbidden sparks thousands of years ago. But over time, they turned, corrupted by their own desire to control the power they were meant to protect. Luma took over, voice trembling. They hunt spark bearers, always have. Eric's pulse slowed. So you mean they're coming for me? Illyra nodded once. Yes, and if they find you first, they will force the spark inside you to awaken fully, even if your body can't handle it. Rin pointed at Eric's face. Bro, that means you could explode. Eric sighed. Thank you, Rin. Very comforting. Rin shrugged. Just keeping it real. Illyra ignored them both. We take the direct route through the Hollow Veil. It cuts our travel from 3 days to 1. Luma stepped back sharply. Illyra, no. The Hollow Veil is cursed. Illyra's expression hardened. The wardens will catch us if we don't. Eric swallowed. What is the Hollow Veil? Luma whispered the answer. A forest where the sky disappears, where time bends, where echoes walk, and shadows whisper back. Rin shuddered. Why is everything in this world terrifying? Eric looked down at his wrist, at the spark that had changed everything. It throbbed again, almost like a heartbeat answering the forest around them. He took a slow breath. If the wardens are coming, then we don't have a choice. Illyra nodded. Luma muttered. I hate this, and tightened her grip on her staff. Rin sighed dramatically. Fine. If we die, I'm haunting all of you. The Hollow Veil. By the time they reached the edge of the Hollow Veil, the sky had turned an unsettling shade of deep blue, darker than evening, lighter than night, like the world couldn't decide what time it should be. A wall of trees towered above them, their branches twisted together like skeletal hands. A thin mist curled between the trunks. Even the air felt wrong. Eric inhaled, and the air tasted sweet, almost metallic, like magic. Old magic. Dangerous magic. Illyra stepped forward first. Stay close. Don't answer any whispers. Don't follow any lights. And whatever happens, a gust of cold wind swept through the leaves. Illyra finished. Don't look back. Wrong. Froze. Why? Why would you say that? What happens if we look back? Illyra's jaw tightened. The veil remembers its intruders, and it hates being watched. Eric exhaled shakily. This was happening. The spark inside him hummed like it recognized this place, like something here was calling to it. He stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the border of the Hollow Veil, the world behind him went silent. No sound, no wind, no birds, just a crushing, suffocating quietness. And then a voice, not inside his head this time, but echoing through the forest. Welcome, Sparkbearer. Eric froze. Luma gasped. Rin jumped behind a tree. Illyra whispered, No, it can't be. The shadows shifted. A shape emerged, something ancient, something tall. Something wearing bone-white armor that seemed to grow from its own flesh. A warden. Its eyes glowed like dying stars. And the forest whispered one word again, louder this time. The warden stepped fully into view. Its armor was not forged. It looked grown, as if bone, metal, and something far more ancient had fused over centuries into a single living shell. Each plate pulsed faintly, like veins ran beneath the surface. The helmet was featureless, except for two dim burning lights where eyes should be. Yeah, those lights locked onto Eric. The forest seemed to shrink away, trees bending back as if afraid. Rin whispered, voice cracking, "Tell me that's just a really ugly statue." Alira didn't blink. "No, that is a first-generation warden, one of the originals." Luma grabbed Eric's sleeve tightly. They were the first protectors of the Sparks, the most powerful, the ones who survived the fall. The warden tilted its head, creaking like stone grinding on stone. Then it spoke, not with a mouth, but through the air itself, vibrating in their bones. "You carry what was forbidden." Eric's heart hammered painfully. He didn't answer. He didn't know what answer could save him. The warden took a slow step forward. The ground quaked. Leaves fell upward instead of down. Rin hid behind Luma. "All right, great. Gravity is broken. We're dead. Cool." Alira drew her sword, even though they all knew it was useless. "Eric," she whispered, "stay behind me." The warden raised an arm. It wasn't a hand. Not exactly. More like a cluster of long jointed blade fingers, each etched with runes that glowed faintly in the dim forest light. "The spark stirs," it said, "untamed, unbound. It will consume you." Eric swallowed. "I didn't ask for any of this." The warden's head tilted again. "No one asks." Its voice was cold, final, ancient. Alira stepped forward, blade drawn. "He is under my protection." The warden turned its glowing eyes toward her. "You're irrelevant." Rin squeaked, "I agree. She's very irrelevant. Please ignore her." Alira glared at him. The warden stepped closer, only a few paces from Eric now. He felt the spark inside him flare, reacting on its own. A pulse of light flickered under his skin. The warden froze, then kneeled. Eric's breath caught. Rin's eyes bulged. "Admit that thing. Just bow to you." Even Alira looked shaken. Luma whispered, trembling, "This can't be right. Wardens kneel only to the ancient bearers, and those bloodlines died thousands of years ago." The warden bowed its head deeply. "A spark bearer. You awaken the line of Elendor." Alira's eyes snapped to Eric. Elendor, the first Spark King, the one who started the rebellion. His lineage was wiped out. The warden rose again, towering over them. "You cannot flee your purpose. The spark is chosen. You will come." Eric shook his head instinctively, stepping back. "No, I don't even understand what's happening. I'm not going anywhere with you." The warden inhaled. The warden inhaled, though it had no lungs, and the forest darkened as if breathing with it. "Refusal is expect." Branches twisted overhead, forming spiraling patterns. The warden extended its arm, and the forest obeyed. Vines shot forward, aiming for Eric's legs and arms. Alira slashed them away, sparks flying. "Eric, run!" Rin didn't need to be told. He was already sprinting deeper into the forest, screaming. Luma grabbed Eric's wrist. "Come on." The veil reacts to the warden's presence. "We have to move." Eric turned to flee, but the warden's voice boomed through the trees. "You cannot escape destiny." The ground split open beneath their feet, roots writhing like serpents. The spark in Eric's arm flared again, stronger, brighter, burning beneath his skin. He cried out, clutching it. Luma looked at his arm in horror. "It's resonating with the warden," Alira shouted. "Eric, control it." "I can't." The warden raised both arms. The trees bent inward, forming a prison of living wood. "Come with me, or be taken." Eric felt his heartbeat sync with the spark, each throb sending heat through his body. Something awakened inside him. Something old, something powerful. Something that recognized the warden, not as an enemy, but as a relic of a forgotten past. Eric felt words forming in his throat, words he didn't understand, words that didn't feel like his own. His voice came out deeper, older. "I'll command you. Stand down." The forest shook. The warden staggered backward, armor cracking with a sound like shattering bone. Alira gasped. Luma dropped her staff. Rin, who was hanging from a tree branch, screamed, "What did you just do?" Eric panted, trembling. "I don't know." The warden steadied itself, and then slowly it bowed again. Even deeper. "We obey." The forest went silent. The vines retreated. The trees straightened. The mist faded. Eric stared at the towering creature kneeling before him and felt the spark warm within his chest. Alira whispered in awe and fear. "You just commanded a warden?" Shrew slid down the tree trunk, shaking. "Bro, Are you the final boss? Luma stepped closer, studying Eric with wide, terrified eyes. No, he's not the final boss. She swallowed a heavy, unnatural quiet, as if the hollow veil itself were holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Eric stood in the center, chest heaving, sparks still pulsing beneath his skin, glowing faintly like a heartbeat of molten gold. Around him, his friends stared in awe, fear, and disbelief. The warden knelt before him, its massive frame bending low, its armored form hissing faintly with energy. The glow from Eric's spark reflected across its polished bone-white plates, illuminating runes and sigils that seemed to shift when unobserved. Its voice, deep and resonant, vibrated through the ground itself. A spark bearer, your command resonates through the veil. The old oaths are voided. The old oaths are voided. The prophecy is shattered. You are the line reborn. Eric swallowed, fear clashing with the strange surge of pride and power coursing through him. He had not asked for any of this. He had not sought to be chosen. Yet the spark inside him had awakened, had responded to the warden, and the veil had obeyed. Something ancient had recognized him as a heir, a conduit, a force that could not be denied. Rin, still clinging nervously to a nearby branch, finally broke the silence. So, wait. You're basically like King of Magic or something. Or Scary Warden Whisperer. Elira's hand tightened on Eric's shoulder. This is serious, Rin. He is now bound to the spark, bound to the hollow veil, bound to powers no mortal has seen in centuries. Luma's gaze didn't leave Eric. You understand, don't you? She whispered. The wardens will obey you. The forest itself will obey you. But this also marks you as a target. There are forces, old forces, that will rise to claim the spark. You will not have peace. Not ever. Eric felt the weight of her words press down on him. The spark thrummed hotter, answering their thoughts, their fear, their awe. It pulsed as though alive, as though impatient to act, to reshape the world around him. The warden rose to its full height, looming above Eric, its glowing eyes softened slightly, not with subservience but with recognition. The creature extended one massive hand, plated in white bone metal, toward him. A bearer of the spark, swear your command. Bind us to your will, or release us to the veil's judgment. Eric's gaze dropped to the glowing pulse beneath his skin. The spark seemed to throb faster, almost urging him to act. He felt power thrumming through his veins, raw, ancient, intoxicating. He had feared it moments ago, yet now it felt right, necessary. He lifted a trembling hand and placed it on the warden's outstretched palm. Light flared, streaming through his arm, across the creature's armor into the forest itself. A hum vibrated in his chest and in the trees. The hollow veil seemed to breathe. Exhale, awaken fully. Need command you, serve the spark. Serve me, he said, his voice stronger than he expected, echoing through the trees, through the roots, through the ancient magic that lingered here. The warden's knees hit the ground in unison, a thunderous, metallic clang. Its head bowed so low that the forest shadows seemed to cover it completely. It is done. The spark-bearer commands. We obey. The mist lifted from the hollow veil. The shadows retreated. The trees straightened. Even the forest floor seemed to settle like a storm passing. Eric could feel the spark calming, pulsing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. The veil had acknowledged him. The wardens had submitted. Rin shook his head slowly. I don't know what I just watched, but I think we're screwed. Alera allowed herself a small smile. Oh no, Rin, we're alive. For now. But Eric, you are more than a bearer. You are a force. The spark is not just magic. It's destiny. And destiny does not forgive mistakes. Eric looked down at his glowing wrist, then at the warden kneeling before him, and finally out at the forest stretching endlessly in every direction. The weight of power, responsibility, and unknown threats pressed down on him. He had survived the hollow veil, awakened the spark, commanded the wardens, and shattered centuries of prophecy. Yet he felt only the beginning. The spark whispered in his mind, softly, urgently, the line awakens. The world is waiting. You are ready, if you dare. Eric exhaled, a shiver running down his spine. He was no longer just a boy, no longer just a bearer of a forbidden power. He was the line reborn, the spark awakened, the master of the wardens, and the world would never be the same again.